What if you went to sleep one night and you didn't wake up? Imagine this: perfectly healthy young men suddenly dying in their sleep, often right after experiencing nightmares so terrifying that they would stay awake for days to avoid falling asleep again. And when they finally drifted off, they never woke up. But this wasn't a horror movie, it was terrifyingly real. These mysterious, tragic deaths didn't just inspire A Nightmare on Elm Street, they were the roots of one of horror's most iconic villains, Freddy Krueger. What's going on, everybody? I hope you had a great Halloween, and I'm uploading actually right now, the day after, because from now on I'm just putting this out to all of you. We are going to be uploading on Friday, and if we get those likes up and the views up, then it's going to go to twice a week. But yes, Friday in between 5 and 7 p.m., sometimes maybe 8 o'clock. That's our new schedule. So every Friday, you don't even need the notification. Just come here. But seriously, turn on your notifications as well. So give this video a big like, because why not? I did Hell Month. I'm going to do it for the rest of my life. And, you know, that's a lot of stories. So just give it a like. And without any further ado, as of now, it's time to slip into a crazy mind that's not our own. Let's go. So this true horror begins far away from American suburbia, across the world to Southeast Asia, where a small ancient ethnic group, the Hmong, lived in Laos. And they had largely escaped global conflict until they found themselves unwillingly caught in the crossfire of the Cold War. You see, when Laos became a dangerous battleground in the Vietnam War, the Hmong, facing persecution from the communist forces, had to make a desperate choice: fight or flee. And many of them were forced to abandon absolutely everything and embarking on these grueling journeys that took them across this rugged landscape to hostile territories, to these refugee camps in Thailand, and eventually to the United States. But unfortunately, a new nightmare followed them to America. So as they just arrive here, and feeling relief that they now get to experience the American dream, just within a couple months of arriving, stories began surfacing among the Hmong community. Young, healthy men were dying in their sleep. And there was no warning, no apparent cause. These men were not elderly or unwell in any way. In fact, they were in their prime in life, and then suddenly and inexplicably, they were gone. And of course, at this point, doctors got involved, but they were absolutely baffled. I mean, the victims didn't seem to have any physical signs of illness, injury, or trauma. You could say that nothing made sense, and this was becoming almost stranger than fiction. Plus, once these young men expired, there were no conclusive findings in their autopsies, and no medical tests pointed to any answer. But as more and more cases emerged, one haunting commonality came to light, and that was that many of these men had died after awaking from these horrific, vivid nightmares. And these weren't just your ordinary bad dreams, no. They were so real and so terrifying that the men would literally refuse to sleep again, because for some reason they were terrified of what awaited them as they closed their eyes. And in Minnesota, Oregon, and California, these cases continued. Each one followed the exact same eerie pattern. I mean, at first, the family members would report that the victims seemed haunted by something within their dreams. And then all of a sudden their breathing would start to change and they would toss and turn, and then silence. As you could imagine, fear swept through the Hmong community. Some speculated it was spirits of those who had died in Laos, and now they were exacting revenge, haunting those who had survived and left behind their homeland. But others were convinced that it was a dark, dark curse. The Hmong even had a name for it: Dab Song. And that is spelled D-A-B-T-S-O-G, 2 separate words. And I don't know why I did this, but I randomly turned the words around. And seemingly it fits very well for this story. Dab Sog, spelled backwards, is bad ghost. I'm not lying to you. When I noticed this, I got the chills up and down my body, like something or someone from a different dimension was trying to tell me something. And it could have just been, a coincidence, but the craziest thing is, what if it wasn't? And one of the most haunting cases was Yong Len Thao, who had been through the horrors that only few could understand. You see, when he would close his eyes, he didn't escape to a dream. He plummeted back into the jungles of Laos, where he had once hidden from armed forces in mud pits and abandoned huts. And in the heart of the night, just as he kind of began to drift off, a familiar unease crept over him, a feeling that he could not explain. It was like this dark presence that was just pulling him downward. But this time, his nightmares began to change, and he saw these figures that were shadowy but indistinct standing right in his room. Sometimes they just hovered right over the edges of his vision, always kind of out of focus. But other times they came closer, towering over him, whispering in a language that he could not understand. His wife would later recall nights when Yong would sit up in bed, eyes wide open, barely breathing. And when she would ask him, what did he see? He couldn't say. But his heart would be pounding so bad, and he would be drenched in all this sweat as if he had narrowly escaped death. And soon he began fearing sleep altogether, muttering about these unseen forces and recounting these vivid nightmares of a dark figure pressing in on his chest, laughing as he was trying to struggle to breathe. Whatever this is, it seems sinister. And despite his wife's claims for him to go and seek help, Yong's pride held firm. And he would say, "I'm stronger than they are, whoever they are." He would say, brushing her concern off with a weak smile. But as the nights continued to wear on, Yong grew weaker and weaker, as if his spirit has been worn down by a battle that he just couldn't explain. And one night, after telling his children stories of the old days in Laos, he fell asleep, too exhausted to resist. And that was the crucial night that Yong's heart stopped in his sleep. His final struggle etched into his face as if he had fought a monster to his last breath. And over time, some doctors tried to find, explanations on what happened, and some attributed the deaths to the trauma from the war, the brutal conditions these men had survived. I mean, remember, these were all young, healthy men. Or they said it could have been the stress of adapting to a completely new world, America. But while some of these explanations might have been kind of logical, they didn't explain the physical aspect of it, a very real and very fatal nature of these nightmares. And as the death toll continued to rise, some surviving victims reported seeing a dark figure in their dreams as well. And what's even more chilling, the figure was the same in all of their dreams, a shadowy, terrifying presence watching them, pursuing them, hovering just beyond their reach. Another survivor described waking up gasping for air, his heart racing as if he had been running for his life, and he was only one of the lucky ones. Now, doctors actually gave a name to this phenomenon. It was called sudden, unexplained, nocturnal death syndrome, or SUNDS, S-U-N-D-S, and acknowledging that it is unique to young, healthy Southeast Asian men, and though they could now describe, they gave a name to this phenomenon, they still could not explain it. And I feel like we do that a lot. We can find a name for something, but we can't explain it. In a case like this, it should really terrify us all. And at that time, across the country, filmmaker Wes Craven stumbled upon these reports, and he was immediately captivated by this almost unhuman mystery. I mean, Craven was a man who understood fear and had seen terrors in many different ways, many different faces. But this, young men dying in their sleep after experiencing intense nightmares, this was something else entirely. Because he actually wondered, what if the thing that was killing them in their dreams was actually real? And he wondered that a lot. He said, what if it was actually pursuing them? A relentless presence that could cross from dream to reality. And from there, that eerie idea began to take shape. Craven then envisioned a villain, a sadistic figure who would haunt the sleep of innocent young people, a being who could blur the line between dream and reality. And thus, Freddy Krueger was born. A nightmarish character with a scarred face, a tattered hat, and that infamous glove of razor-sharp blades. Krueger didn't just scare his victims, he invaded their most private moments. And once you fell asleep, there was absolutely no escape. The helplessness of the Hmong victims inspired Craven's villain, who could only strike when his victims were at their most vulnerable, alone and unaware in the dead of night. And Craven even once shared that the nightmarish figure was also inspired by a terrifying experience from his childhood. Because late one night as a boy, he awoke to the sight of a man that was staring at him through his bedroom window. And that man wore one of those odd hats and had a sinister grin. And he didn't speak, he just stood there. These piercing eyes fixated on Craven, terrifying him to his core. And then, without a word, he walked away, leaving the boy forever haunted by this encounter. And decades later, that same piercing gaze would belong to Freddy Krueger. So, through the scientific community, even though it eventually gave it a name, SUNDS, the exact cause remains unknown. Was it a physical phenomenon triggered by trauma and fear? Or was there something else at work? Something beyond the understanding of medical science? Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street became a cult classic. Its villain a lasting symbol of terror that awaits us in sleep. Freddy Krueger, with his bladed glove and twisted smile, became more than just a fictional character. He was a reminder of the darkness that lurks in the recesses of the mind, the place where even the bravest among us feel fear. And so the next time you settle down to maybe watch this horror film that could be one of your favorites, just remember this story, the tale of the Hmong refugees and the nightmare that followed them across the world. Because for some, sleep is just a momentary escape from reality. But for others, it's a doorway, one that leads them to a terror that they may never awake from. If you love stories like this, let's make sure to get this up to at least 50 likes, and do me a favor, tell a couple of your friends, just let them know. But in the meantime, there is a story so horrifying but real, and it's possibly one of the scariest true crime horror stories I've ever told, and that story is right here. So make sure to check it out and then let me know what you think of it in the comments. I hope you guys really enjoyed Hell Month, and that's all I got for you. Cheers.